Close your eyes for a moment and let the world you know dissolve. Let the ceiling above you fade into something older, something that existed before ceilings, before walls, before the concept of shelter itself. You are drifting now, not into sleep, but into the edge of something far more ancient than sleep. The place where the oldest minds of the oldest world stood at the boundary of the known and stared into the dark water and felt in the marrow of their bones that something was looking back. From the heart of the whirlwind, God spoke, not in comfort, not with reassurance, not with the measured pastoral warmth of a deity who has everything under control. He spoke from within a storm that tore the sky apart, and what he chose to speak about, across 41 verses, across thousands of words in the original Hebrew, was a creature, a single creature. One entity so consuming to describe that the creator of all things spent more verses on it than on the instructions for an entire human life. 41 verses, 34 of them dedicated to the anatomy, the texture, the behavior, the sheer unkillable permanence of something that still breathed when those words were spoken. He did not say it had been defeated. He did not use the past tense. He asked Job, and the Hebrew word is timshok, a pulling, a drawing out. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Can you press down its tongue with a cord? Will traders bargain over it? Will fishermen divide it among themselves? The answer, woven into every question, was the same. No. Not you, not anyone. Not any force in the created order. Think about what that admission is. The God who called light out of the void. The God who separated the waters above from the waters below. The God who breathed life into dust and produced something that could weep and laugh and question. That God spent 34 verses describing a creature that he, by implication, does not fully control, and whose existence he does not explain as a past victory. He speaks of it the way a warden speaks of the most dangerous prisoner in the deepest cell, with a kind of careful, authoritative reverence, with the tone of someone who knows exactly what is down there, and knows that what is down there knows exactly where it is. Where is it right now? That question is not a rhetorical flourish. It is the most important question the oldest theological tradition in the Western world has been quietly managing for 3,000 years. And to begin to answer it honestly, you have to leave the Bible behind entirely. Or rather, you have to go back before the Bible, to the place from which the Bible inherited its most terrifying image. You have to go to Ugarit. Ugarit was a city on the coast of what is now northern Syria, a prosperous Canaanite city-state that flourished between 1400 and 1200 BCE. It was buried for millennia. In 1928, a Syrian farmer's plow struck something hard beneath the surface of his field, and what was pulled from that earth over the following years would quietly detonate inside the world of biblical scholarship, and has never once been discussed on a Sunday morning. The tablets recovered from Ugarit were written in a language so close to ancient Hebrew that scholars could read them without a translation key. They described a mythology that the ancient Canaanites lived inside, a theology of storm gods and sea gods, of cosmic battles for the right to rule creation. And within that theology, within the great collection of texts now known as the Baal cycle, there was a monster. Its name in Ugaritic was Lotan, written in the consonantal script simply as LTN, 3 letters, the same 3 letters that form the root of the Hebrew Leviathan, Leviathan, the same root, the same consonants, the same creature wearing a different language's skin. In the Baal cycle, Lotan serves the sea god Yam, the lord of the primordial ocean, and it is described with 7 heads. 7 heads that could be crushed, 7 points of resistance against the order of the cosmos. The storm god Baal defeats Lotan, and in the poetry preserved on those clay tablets, the victory is described in language so close to the biblical text that scholars no longer debate influence. They debate only degree. The Ugaritic text reads, "As you smote Lotan, the fleeing serpent, killed off the writhing serpent, the ruler with 7 heads." And the book of Isaiah, written centuries later in chapter 27, verse 1, reads, "On that day the Lord will punish Leviathan the fleeing serpent, Leviathan the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea." Fleeing serpent. Twisting serpent. 7 heads. Future tense. The Hebrew prophets did not invent this creature. They inherited it. They took the most terrifying thing in the cosmological vocabulary of the surrounding world, the Canaanite chaos dragon of the primordial ocean, and they placed it inside their own theology. Not as a defeated relic, not as a conquered symbol, as an active, ongoing presence that their God would one day finally, definitively kill. But here is the thing that mainstream theology has never adequately explained, that seminaries have managed through careful selective reading for over a century. Isaiah 27:1 says Leviathan will be slain in the future. The day of the Lord has not yet arrived. The fleeing serpent has not yet been punished. And yet Psalm 74:14 says it already happened, past tense. God crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave him as food to the creatures of the desert. Done. Finished. The psalmist is calling God to remember his own greatest victory, the slaying of the chaos dragon, as evidence that he should act again in the present crisis. So Leviathan is dead, and Leviathan will be killed. And in Job 41, Leviathan is currently alive, and nothing in creation can touch it. 3 texts, 3 tenses, 1 creature, and no institutional explanation that does not require you to selectively decide, based purely on theological convenience, which passages you are permitted to read literally and which ones you are not. The framework that holds all 3 simultaneously, without discarding any of them, is the one that modern organized religion quietly abandoned long ago. It is the framework of primordial chaos theology. And to understand it, you have to go back one step further still, to the oldest creation story in the world. Long before the first word of Genesis was written, the Babylonians preserved a creation epic called the Enuma Elish. Its written tradition stretches back to at least the 18th century BCE, predating the composition of Genesis by centuries, and in its oldest strands by over a millennium. In this epic, before there was anything, there were 2 primordial waters, Abzu, the freshwater ocean, and Tiamat, the saltwater deep, a vast, churning, monstrous thing consistently depicted as a dragon with multiple heads. The gods were born from the mingling of those waters, and eventually, one of those gods, Marduk, the warrior deity who would become the chief of the Babylonian pantheon, killed Tiamat. He did not simply defeat her, he split her body in half. From the upper portion of her immense draconic form, he fashioned the dome of the heavens. From the lower portion, he constructed the foundation of the earth. The physical universe is built from the body of a murdered chaos dragon. The Hebrew language carries the imprint of this cosmology in a single word, Tehom, the deep, the primordial water over which the Spirit of God moved in Genesis 1:2. Tehom is linguistically related to Tiamat. Before God spoke light into existence, there was already something there, the darkness, the deep, the chaos. And Leviathan, in the oldest theological layer of the Hebrew world, is that chaos given form. It is the dragon of Tehom. It is what existed before the first word of Genesis, and what continues to exist beneath every word that followed. What Psalm 74 describes is not a historical moment in linear time. It is the primordial act of ordering, God imposing structure on chaos at the beginning, spoken in the past tense, because it is the foundation of everything that exists. What Job 41 describes is the present truth, that the chaos has not been annihilated. It has been constrained. It has been pressed into the shape of the world and held there. God did not destroy Leviathan. God imprisoned it. The sea is its cell. The weight of creation is its cage, and it waits. Isaiah 27 is the prophecy of the day the cage opens. Let that settle into you as you lie here in the dark. The oldest texts of the oldest tradition in the Western world are telling you something that 3,000 years of institutional religion has worked very hard to prevent you from understanding clearly. The world you live in was not built from nothing. It was built over something. And that something is still there. The sea is not empty. The Tehom did not end at Genesis 1:3. Rest now and listen. We are only at the beginning of what was hidden. You are still here. Good. Let whatever tension remains in your body release downward, into the surface beneath you, into the earth beneath that surface, into the dark water beneath the earth. You are floating now on something older than stone, older than soil, older than the names we gave to either. The ancients felt this too. The people who lived closest to the oldest texts, the desert sectarians, the apocalyptic communities who withdrew from Jerusalem into the barren wilderness of Qumran, who hid their most sacred documents in sealed clay jars inside caves above the Dead Sea. They understood that the world was not what it appeared. They understood that beneath the surface of the ordinary, something vast and dark was pressing upward. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into a cave to flush out a stray animal. He heard it shatter something. What he had broken was a clay jar containing scrolls wrapped in linen, hidden there since the 1st century of the Common Era, sealed against the day they were needed. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Thousands of fragments of parchment and papyrus that revealed a Judaism far stranger, far more cosmologically terrifying than anything that survived into the synagogues and seminaries of the modern world. The community at Qumran lived in a state of perpetual cosmic warfare. Their texts are saturated with the language of monsters, of angels, of a universe in which the boundary between the visible and the invisible is tissue-thin and constantly under assault. Their war scroll is an actual military manual, rules, formations, ritual prayers, for the final battle at the end of time between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. This was not metaphor for them. This was operational theology. They were preparing for a war that involved creatures far larger than any human army. Among the Qumran library were fragments of the Book of Enoch, a text that early Jewish communities treated as scripture, that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has maintained as canonical scripture to this day, and that was excluded from the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament through a process of editorial violence that scholars are only now beginning to fully document. The first Book of Enoch, chapter 60, contains a passage about Leviathan that is so specific, so geographically and cosmologically precise, that it reads not like mythology but like a report. On the day of creation, the text is explicit that this happened at the beginning. The forces of chaos were judged too immense to be held together in one place. They were separated. The female monster, Leviathan, was cast into the abyss of the sea, into the subterranean fountains, into the deep water beneath the deep water, in the place where the light of the world has never reached and where even the memory of light is a foreign concept. She was placed there deliberately. Not by accident. Not because she was defeated, but because the architecture of creation required her to be there, in the dark, held at the foundation. The male monster, Behemoth, was placed in a desolate, invisible wilderness far to the east, in a place the Enochian text calls Dundayin, a name that survives in different manuscript traditions in different forms, but that always points to the same location. The invisible desert at the margin of the world, the place where the land itself runs out and becomes something the human eye cannot process. Two creatures, separated at the dawn of time, held alive across the entire span of history, waiting. Waiting for what? The Talmud answers this question with an image so strange and so magnificent that it reads, even to a modern mind trained to dismiss such things, like the memory of something true. In Tractate Bava Batra, the rabbis describe what will happen at the end of days, when the Messianic age dawns and the structure of the present world dissolves into the world to come. God will arrange a banquet, not a metaphorical banquet, a feast, and the main course will be Leviathan and Behemoth. The rabbis discussed the logistics. They debated, in the carefully reasoned language of legal scholarship, how these two creatures would be slaughtered. They considered whether the meat would require the ritual process of kosher slaughter to be permissible for the righteous to eat. They discussed which creature would kill which, the Leviathan piercing Behemoth with its fins, the Behemoth goring Leviathan with its horns, as though reconstructing the account of a historical event that had been witnessed and recorded. To eat the monster is to assimilate its power. To consume the chaos is to become the proof that chaos has been finally subdued. But the image that follows the feast is the one that haunts. After Leviathan is slaughtered, its skin, the impenetrable, scaled, luminescent hide that Job 41 describes as so tightly sealed that no air can pass between the plates, will be taken by God and used to construct a sukkah, a tent, a shelter, for the righteous who gather at the end of time. And the remainder of the skin will be stretched over the walls of Jerusalem and will radiate a light so bright and so strange that it will illuminate the entire world from that single point of origin. The Chaos Dragon's hide becomes the shelter. The monster's skin becomes the light. This is not a small idea. The Sukkot prayer, the prayer recited when Jews leave their temporary booths at the end of the Festival of Booths, a prayer still recited today in synagogues and homes across the world, says, "May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our forefathers, that just as I have fulfilled and dwelt in this sukkah, so may I merit in the coming year to dwell in the sukkah of the skin of Leviathan." Think about what is being prayed for. People who live in the modern world, with electricity and insurance and the concept of scientific materialism, are reciting a prayer asking to one day be sheltered inside the skin of the chaos dragon of the primordial ocean. The prayer survived because the memory survived, because somewhere in the oldest strata of Jewish consciousness, below every layer of rationalization and institutional management, the knowledge that Leviathan is real and that the end of the world involves what happens to it never fully went away. It became liturgy instead. You are drifting deeper now. Let the weight of those words settle into you without needing to resolve them. The deepest things do not resolve. They remain the way the Tehom remains beneath everything. The way the creature remains in the dark water, in the abyss, in the place the Enochian text marks on its internal map of creation. There is more. There is always more in the oldest dark. Rest here a moment before we descend further. The dark is deeper now than it was when you first lay down. The dark always deepens when you stop fighting it. Let it deepen. You are safe. You are in the oldest place, the place before the story, the place the story came from, the place that every human consciousness that has ever existed has returned to when the lights go out and the sounds of the world fade, and there is only the slow rhythm of breathing and the awareness of something very old, pressing gently at the edges of thought. There were other people who understood this place. They lived in Egypt, in a specific moment, 1945, a summer morning, when a peasant digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi struck something that had been sealed in the earth for 16 centuries, a clay jar. Inside the jar, 13 leather-bound papyrus codices. The lost Gnostic Gospels, buried in the late 4th century to protect them from bishops who were burning documents that asked the wrong questions. The Gnostics asked the most uncomfortable question in the history of Western theology. What if the God who made this world is not the highest God? Their answer was not presented as speculation. It was presented as direct knowledge, gnosis, passed from teacher to student through traditions that trace themselves back to the earliest Christian communities, to the apostles themselves, to a transmission of understanding that the church councils of the 4th century judged too dangerous to survive. What the Gnostics knew, or believed they knew, was this: the world you see is not the work of the ultimate divine. It is the work of something smaller, something that made a mistake. In the Gnostic texts discovered at Nag Hammadi, in the hypostasis of the archons, in On the Origin of the World, in the Apocryphon of John, the creation story is told from the inside of the disaster. In the highest reality, the pleroma, the fullness, there is a divine light that cannot be diminished or contained. From that light, various emanations descended in complexity and beauty. And one of those emanations, a female divine principle called Sophia, wisdom, attempted to create something independently, without the consent of the higher order. Her unauthorized creation fell. It fell into the void outside the pleroma, and from the disruption of that falling, something was born, a creature with the body of a serpent and the face of a lion, whose eyes blazed with a destructive fire. This entity, called Yaldabaoth by the Gnostics, did not know where he came from. He looked around at the dark, watery chaos he inhabited and said, in words that echo across the Gnostic library with the chill of genuine theological horror, "It is I who am God, and there is no other God besides me." He did not know that he was wrong. He could not see the light above him. He was blind, in the specific way that the Gnostic tradition understood blindness, not the absence of sight, but the absence of awareness that there is anything beyond what you can see. And from this blind, arrogant, serpentine demiurge, the Gnostics said, came the creation of the material world. The physical universe is not the work of the highest God. It is the work of his ignorant, well-intentioned, catastrophically limited offspring. And the Leviathan, in this framework, is something more terrifying than a monster in the sea. The Ophites were a Gnostic sect who preserved, in their ritual practice, a diagram of the cosmos, a map of the layers of reality that initiates were required to memorize so that, after death, Their souls could navigate the structure of the universe and pass through the planetary spheres ruled by the archons, the demonic administrators of the material world, and reach the pleroma beyond. The early church father Origen, writing in the 3rd century, described these diagrams in scathing detail, intending to discredit them. In doing so, he preserved them. The diagram showed the cosmos as a series of concentric circles. The innermost circles were the planetary spheres, each ruled by an archon with an animal face: the lion, the bull, the serpent, the eagle, the bear, the dog, the ass. These were the wardens of the material layers of reality, the gatekeepers who demanded passwords from souls attempting to ascend. But surrounding all of those circles, enclosing the entire material universe, was an outermost circle, a thick, dark boundary, the absolute edge of everything the archons controlled. It was labeled Leviathan. The Leviathan is the wall of the world, not a symbol of the wall, not a representation of the wall itself. The outer boundary of the material prison, the thing that ensures that souls without gnosis, without the secret knowledge of the divine names and the passwords of the light, cannot escape the cycle of material existence. They are swallowed. They are recycled. They return to the prison inside another body and live another life without remembering what they are. The Pistis Sophia, one of the most vast and strange of all the Gnostic texts, a post-resurrection discourse in which Jesus speaks directly to Mary Magdalene and the disciples about the true structure of the afterlife, describes the outer darkness with a precision that is almost clinical in its horror. The outer darkness, Jesus says, is a great dragon whose tail is in his mouth, outside the whole world and surrounding the whole world. The Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail. Ancient symbol of cyclical time, of the boundary between being and non-being, adopted and specified and named, Leviathan. And within the belly of this cosmic dragon, the Pistis Sophia says, are 12 dungeons, 12 regions of systematic architectural punishment, each ruled by a demon with an animal face, each designed for a specific category of soul. The first dungeon is ruled by a demon with the face of a crocodile, the second by one with the face of a cat, the third a dog, the fourth a serpent, the fifth a bull, the sixth a wild boar. And so it continues, escalating in complexity and horror, until the final dungeons are ruled by entities with multiple heads, 7 heads in some descriptions, echoing the 7 heads of Lotan, of the primordial chaos dragon that predated the Hebrew Bible by centuries. The Gnostics were not saying the same thing as the rabbis of the Talmud. They were saying something stranger and darker. The rabbis said, Leviathan is in the sea, held there by God, awaiting its appointed death at the end of time. The Gnostics said, Leviathan is the edge of everything. You are already inside it. You have always been inside it. The question is whether you know the way out. To the Gnostics, to die without gnosis was to be cast into the outer darkness, not as punishment by an angry God, but as an automatic consequence of not knowing what you are. The uninitiated soul exits the body and encounters the gatekeeping archons. Without the passwords, without the names of light, the soul cannot pass through the planetary spheres. It falls to the outer boundary. It is absorbed into the dragon. And the dragon, being a closed system, ejects what it absorbs back into the material world in a new form, and the cycle begins again. The Leviathan, in the Gnostic cosmology, is the recycling mechanism of the prison universe. The sea is not empty. The Tehom did not end at Genesis 1:3. And in the Gnostic reading, the prison is not waiting for you at the end of history. You are already in it. You have always been in it. The chaos is not outside the walls of the world. The chaos is the wall. Let that knowledge settle into you now without fear. The oldest traditions of the Western world, the apocalyptic Jews of Qumran, the Gnostic communities of Alexandria and Egypt, the rabbis of the Talmud, were all circling the same central truth from different directions. Something vast and primordial exists at the boundary of what we can perceive. It was there before creation. It is the reason creation is shaped the way it is, and the relationship between God and this creature is not the simple story of the victor and the vanquished that 3,000 years of institutional religion have tried to tell. Rest here. We are nearly at the end of what was hidden. One more descent, and then the dark opens into something that almost resembles peace. You are in the deepest part now, the part where the water is so still it no longer seems like water. It seems like a substance without a name, older than water, the thing from which water was made. The Tehom, the deep, the place where the Spirit of God moved before the first word was spoken, and where something else moved too. Something vast and cold and patient, curled at the foundation of what would become the world. What does it mean that the oldest theological tradition in the Western world chose not to destroy its most terrifying image, but to preserve it? In every direction you examine this question, through the Hebrew scriptures, through the Qumran scrolls, through the Talmud, through the Kabbalistic tradition, through the Gnostic libraries of Nag Hammadi, the creature survives. It is never fully killed, never fully rationalized, never fully reduced to metaphor, no matter how hard the institutional machinery of religion has worked to make it smaller than it is. The Kabbalistic tradition, in the strands of Zoharic mysticism that developed in medieval Spain and Provence, describes Leviathan not as a monster at the edge of God's power, but as the primordial serpent that encircles the world, the negative mirror of the divine creative impulse. The Sitra Achra, the other side. The great dragon whose coiling defines the shape of the created order, the way a riverbank defines the shape of the river. To destroy Leviathan prematurely, the Kabbalistic tradition understood, would be to destabilize the architecture of creation that was built in precise tension with its existence. The chaos cannot simply be killed. It must be contained until the structure of time itself is complete. The cage holds because the dragon presses against it. Without the pressure, the cage collapses. This is what God was actually saying in Job 41. Not, "Look at this magnificent creature I defeated." He was saying, "Look at what I am managing. Look at what the structure of reality is actually built on. Look at what no force in the created order can rouse without my permission." He was not boasting about a trophy. He was describing a load-bearing element of the cosmos. The Leviathan is not imprisoned despite being essential. It is imprisoned because it is essential. The bars hold creation up. And the promise, the covenant embedded in Isaiah 27, in the Talmudic Banquet, in the Sukkot liturgy that has been recited every autumn for thousands of years, is that the day is coming when the debt is finally paid, when the structure of time reaches its end, when the creature that has been holding creation in shape from the inside of its prison is released for the last time, slaughtered, and its substance transformed into something that shelters and illuminates. The chaos dragon becomes the shelter of the righteous. The skin of the monster becomes the tent of peace. The ancient people who lived nearest these texts, who recited the Sukkot prayer in fragile booths of branches and leaves, understanding that the sukkah they sat in was a memory and a promise of the one to come, They were not afraid of this. They had made peace with the deepest thing. They had looked into the Tehom, into the dark water, into the face of the creature at the foundation, and they had built their liturgy around the knowledge that even this, even the oldest chaos, even the thing that existed before light had a name, would one day become something you could rest beneath. You are resting beneath something right now. The weight of everything that has existed before you, every civilization that stood over the dark water and felt the Leviathan beneath it, every scribe who copied the words of Job 41 by lamplight, every rabbi who debated the kosher status of chaos dragon flesh with the precise seriousness of someone who believed the question mattered, every Gnostic who memorized the passwords for the planetary spheres and traced the outer boundary of the universe with their finger on a diagram and understood that the boundary was alive. All of that weight is above you now, and beneath it you are small. And being small in the face of the ancient is not terror, it is rest. The Tehom is still there. The creature is still in the dark water. The outer boundary of the world is still coiled around everything you know and everything you will ever know. And it is very old, and it has been very patient. And its patience is the patience of something that has nowhere to be until the end of time. You have nowhere to be right now either. There is only this moment, this weight, this darkness that is not threatening, but textured with the age of everything that has ever existed. The chaos does not reach you here. The cage holds. The structure of creation, built in tension with the thing it contains, holds. And you are inside it, small and warm, and the night is long, and the water is deep. And somewhere below the level of thought, something vast is breathing very slowly in the dark. Close your eyes all the way now, not into nothing, into the Tehom, into the oldest place, into the deep that existed before the first word and that will exist after the last one. You do not need to know what is down there. You only need to know that it has been there since before you began, and it will be there long after the last star forgets its own name. Some things are too old to be afraid of. Some things are simply the oldest shape of the world. The sukkah of the Leviathan is waiting. It has always been waiting, and it is, somehow, warm inside. Sleep now. The deep holds everything, even you.